My name is Teresa Maginn Dillon, and Father James Patrick Maginn is my first cousin. My father was Patrick, and Father Jim's father was James. I was privileged to meet Father Jim when he came back to County Down, and I think the year was 1948, and I met him several times in his father's house in Newcastle, County Down, and again at our house. And I particularly remember one party, and that was the last one. My parents gave a party for him before he left for the United States and his return to Korea. And at that party there were several family members and many neighbors. And I remember Father Jim going around each one individually and giving them a blessing and spending a lot of time with them. When he was asked for his advice, he took the route of peace and prayer in his response to any question or request that was asked of him. And after he returned to Korea, my father and I every Saturday evening would visit with Uncle James. And of course the talk was always about Father Jim and the latest news from Korea. And then the Korean War broke out in June 1950, and we didn't hear any more news from him. And I remember going to Uncle James's house, and he'd have this huge stack of Far East magazines. That was the name of the Columban magazine back in those days. And he would have the newspapers lined up, trying to find out the latest news from Korea. But there wasn't any. There was no communication from Father Jim, and the Columban fathers were unable to get any information. And then I remember that day in 1952 when his brother Frank came to our house and told us that Father Jim was dead. It was such a sense of loss and grieving. Years later, when I was in the Mater Hospital in Belfast getting my nurse's training, I asked a priest from St. Malachy's College to offer Mass for me. And he told me to pray through the intercession of Father Jim, which I did. And later on, I prayed and asked through Father Jim's intercession that God would give me the guidance to meet the person that God had selected for me, for to be my spouse. And when I met Jack, I showed him these newspaper cuttings that I had carried around with me. And one of them was of Father Jim's grave in Chuncheon. And when Jack looked at that, he said he had been there to his grave, and he had also given money to rebuild the church in Chuncheon. Jack had served in Korea during the war. That was part of his military service. Then in 2002, Jack and I went to Butte, Montana, and we saw the house on East Granite Street where Father Jim spent the first 10 years of his life. Then we went up to the statue of Our Lady of the Rockies, which is built on the Continental Divide, 9,000 feet above sea level. And in the base of that statue, we had placed a plaque in memory of Father Jim. In 2003, we went to South Korea, and we went one Sunday to Chuncheon, went to Mass in the church there, and after Mass, we went to the graveyard behind the church and visited and prayed at Father Jim's grave. That was very meaningful because I knew that I was, at that time, the only blood relative who had ever visited his grave. And after that visit, we met the two priests of the parish. That parish is now staffed by native Korean priests. We told them what we knew about Father Jim, and they were pleased to get the information. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord. Amen.